All right, guys, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with Hilary. We have a meetup in Dallas on the 18th, so that is coming right up. If you need additional information, it's on Mighty Networks. Right after that, we are going to the 150th Kentucky Derby. That is on May 4th, so I'm excited about that. Then we have the Bay FC soccer game with Brandy Chastain. That is on July 6th. So if you want to hang out with Brandy and see her brand new team, let us know about that because we got to straighten out the ticket situation. And if you want to join us for our retreat on September 29th and live with 5 legends for 4 days, you will get to spend 4 days with Robert Hamilton Owens, Mace Curran, Joe Jacoby, yes, the one Joe Jacoby right here, Megan Riley, and Jackie Summers. So we're excited about that. If you want to join our next cohort that we have, we already have 11 people on the waiting list, so we've only got 9 slots left. There's a bunch of people who are on this call that are in the cohort. So if you want to ask them any questions about it, feel free. But for anyone who's new to our Legend series, just give you a quick format update. So Hilary and I are going to chop it up for like 30 minutes, fireside chat, catch up, talk, and then we're going to open it up for live Q&A. If you have a question, you don't have to put what your question is in the chat. Just say, I've got a question for Hilary, and I will tee you up with the one and only Hilary Phelps. So I am beyond excited to have Hilary here with us today. She's got such an interesting story and such an important story. I think by age 11, she was the fastest swimmer in the country. She had a 4-year scholarship at the University of Richmond. I don't know if her records have been broken yet, but I think at one point she had 4 school records, and she's had a very successful career in media, marketing, and event management. So I am just absolutely delighted to have Hilary Phelps with us. Before we get into it, Kathy, get us started.
I actually am having a technical difficulty.
Oh,
Not get us started. Hilary knows that I love her, and this is not about her at all.
Does anyone want to sing the song and like do the intro?
Where's Perlo when you need the backup?
I know, seriously. So, Kath, what do I do? Do I wait, or is this
No,
like
Scott, you don't sing it. It's all about the bum 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 bum.
I know. So we could all do that in unison. Kath, do I wait, or do we just get?
Don't. Just
right.
go ahead and get started, and I will let you know if I am able
Hilary,
to recover.
You're gonna have to trust me on this one. We have an insane intro that you would have been like, that's a pretty cool intro. So I'm a little bummed that you're not able to see it, but we'll send it to you once we figure out whatever this technical issue is.
Yeah.
It's Mercury retrograde. The eclipse was yesterday. I'm all in that.
Thank you for understanding.
It's out there. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so excited for this conversation. So the Outlier Project, we're all about trying to help people live their version of an extraordinary life. And, so I think of your ability to live an extraordinary life. I think of it in different buckets. So you've got like the health and wellness bucket, which is physical, mental health, spiritual. You've got career, you've got finances, you've got relationships, and you've got learning and development, because I think you kind of have to be a lifelong learner. And, I think it's really tough to live an extraordinary life if you have an addiction issue. And so I think I'm so excited because I doubt there's anybody on this call today that either hasn't struggled themselves or doesn't know somebody who's struggled with addiction. I know I personally, my oldest son has struggled for a decade with a heroin addiction. And it's just, you know, it's, I don't think anyone's immune to it. So I think you're going to be able to help a lot of people on this call today to understand things better through the lens that you see things through. So I'm going to step back first though. You grew up in rural Maryland, seemed pretty idyllic, like seemed like a pretty cool way to grow up. And I guess walk us through a little bit of your journey growing up. Obviously, you got into swimming early. You were really, really good at it. Didn't I think you had your first drink maybe when you were 14. Kind of walk us through that early part of your life, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, yeah, we grew up, my parents grew up in a really tiny town in Western Maryland. And so when they, you know, their goal, they wanted to get out. My dad played football. My mom was a cheerleader, and they had this kind of idyllic, you know, romantic love. And they decided they wanted to leave, and they moved. It was still a pretty rural area called Whiteford, Maryland, which is, if anybody's familiar, it's like north of Bel Air, which is like north of Baltimore. And so my parents bought this land. My sister and I loved to play outside. You know, and the summers were spent at the pool. My parents thought that water safety was really important. So when I was 6 months old, my dad was in the pool, my mom was on the side. She literally dropped me into the water. I guess that's what, I don't know what that was then, you know, and you could swim up to the surface. And then they had us in swimming lessons. And when I was 7, I joined the summer swim league team. And it was the summer, you know, I have a sister Whitney and a brother Michael. Whitney's 2 years younger, Michael's 7 years younger. And so I started swimming the year that my brother was born. And we went to this meet, and I said, I really want that big trophy. You know, I'm a firstborn, I'm that perfectionist, I want a type A. And I said, I really want that big trophy. And my mom said, well, the kids that get the big trophies are the ones that swim year round. And I'm like, cool, let's do that. Like, sign me up. And so from that point forward, my parents pretty much grew up at the pool, because if I was at the pool, my sister was going to be at the pool. If my sister was at the pool, my brother was tagging along. And if my brother was tagging along, eventually my mom's like, you're going to swim too. So we all got started in swimming because I wanted a big trophy. Because I was like, the bigger, the better. I want that one. And yeah. And so from the time I was, you know, I was 11 and 12, I was swimming year round. I was doing double practices. I was a distance swimmer. So I swam the mile. I was swimming from 5 to 7 in the morning. We lived an hour from the pool, which meant my dad was up at leaving at 3:45 every morning. My parents got a boundary exception, so I could go to a different school. It was actually my mom's school, who was a teacher, and then go back to the pool that night. So my parents were always really dedicated in supporting our goals, and they weren't super pushy, but they were just supportive. And you know, I got straight A's through 7th grade. I still remember history. I got a B. I was the fastest swimmer in the country. And in 6th grade, you know, kind of the moment that I remember this switch happening is at this new school. I was very eclectic and unique, and I was a child of the 80s, and so I love Madonna, and so I had these like crazy skirts and jelly bracelets and all of this like ballet slippers, and I just kind of did my own thing, and these 3 girls made fun of me. And I remember them saying like, nice shoes, you know. And in that moment, later that day, I was flying to an invitational swim meet in Atlanta, where I was the fastest swimmer there for my age group. But in that moment, I allowed someone else's voice to become louder than mine. And even though I had all these external things that said, you're the best at all of these, at swimming, at school, I was an avid reader, I still wasn't good enough. And so that voice kind of perpetuated and lived in my mind of, you're not funny enough, smart enough, pretty enough, good enough. And I started finding people in a room that were better than me at something. And so if someone was better than me at something, it meant that I was less than them. And so I carried that until, when 14, when I started drinking. And it was a way to kind of self-medicate and to quiet those voices of, you're not good enough the way you are.
I think what's interesting is that from the outside looking in, for quite a long period of time, people would have said, wow, here's a somebody who gets a 4-year scholarship, setting records, getting good grades, maybe not in college as much as you did earlier. And you kept it sort of hidden. Tell us about that, kind of the slippery slope that descends into, serious addiction issues that start to change the trajectory of your life.
I think college is tough because it's you can hide drinking really easily. And I used external rules and barriers to say that I was okay. So I still showed up at practice. My grades weren't great, but I was like, it's college. It's what you do. It's a really expensive 4-year party that they're paying for. I was a scholarship swimmer. I had 4 school records. None of them are standing anymore. The girls are so fast. And I saw, but you could find someone at any point. So as long as I had those things going and I could check those boxes and I told myself I was okay. And during college, you can kind of find people that will drink with you. And there were at least 1 or 2 that drank like you. And so what that meant for me was every time I drank, I blacked out. And I didn't have the language to know that other people weren't doing it either. I just thought everybody that was drinking or getting drunk was doing it like me. And so when I woke up in the morning, it felt like I was walking, had like walking pneumonia. I was so sick. I couldn't move, but other people would say like, gosh, I feel so hungover. But what that meant for them was they had a headache or they were just tired that morning. And so it really looked different. And it started to get really scary after college when all of that continued. So my drinking continued. Everybody else was getting jobs and, starting families. And I kind of continued that pattern living outside of Washington, D.C. And I thought it was glamorous, like I'm Sex in the City. I'm Carrie Bradshaw drinking martinis, except I was drinking 2+ bottles of wine and calling it, and calling it a day. And so that started really slipping into that slope. I found myself in relationships that would mirror my addiction. So, one a guy I dated for a while was a big smoked marijuana. So he would smoke marijuana on one end of the couch and I would drink wine on the other end of the couch. And we just became these roommates, but I'd find people to kind of co-sign my drinking because they were doing the same thing. And so you surround yourself with people who are like you or who you want to be like, or who want to be like you. And those are the people that that was the community that I surrounded myself with. And so it became okay.
When did you realize like, okay, this isn't normal? Like I have a problem that I need to deal with.
So when I was in college, my roommate said something, I'd three roommates and they came to me and they're like, this is not cute. Like you are mean. You are like you're one person when you're not drinking. And when you're drinking, you're somebody totally different. And we don't like it. And we don't think you like it either. And I basically told them to kick rocks. I was like, whatever, it's your problem, not mine. I'm going to keep doing what I want to do. I'm not affecting you. I'm living my best life later. And they didn't leave and they stuck by me. We're still friends and they're actually some of my best friends and we not laugh about it today, but they were like, you were a disaster, and that was one of the things that started to become scary and kind of like a repeated pattern was that people would say, I get these breadcrumbs. I get these little glimmers of who you are. And I like that person. But as soon as you put alcohol in your body, all bets are off. And I have no idea who's going to show up. It could be the funny Hilary. It could be the sweet Hilary. It could be the Hilary that's fighting girls in the bathroom because they look at her funny. Like you just never knew who you were going to get. And that started to become really scary. And, I was 25 and I'd wake up with bruises because I would fall when I was walking home from the bar. And things like that started to feel scary. And for a long time, you can take 2 paths. I could take the path of, okay, I want to look at this, or I could take the path of, I'm not ready. This is too hard. I'm going to keep drinking because I'm not ready to look at that. And so for a long time, I took the path of, I'm not ready to look at it because there was a lot of shame. And so I kept drinking, and there weren't a lot of people. I mean, there was nobody in the media. Like today, it's so beautiful. So many people are talking about addiction, recovery, mental health. It's incredible. In 2007, when I got sober, There was one book called Drinking a Love Story by Carolyn Knapp, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's an autobiography of a woman, a female alcoholic, what to expect the first year of sobriety, and like the big book, which is the book for Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program. That was it. And now there's like Quit Lit, and there's all of this stuff. So it wasn't really talked about. And the media representation of women alcoholics or drinkers were Meg Ryan in When a Man Loves a Woman, which is one of my favorite movies. She would sneak vodka and she fell out of a shower. I'm like, well, I'm not falling out of showers. I'm only drinking wine. Excuse me. Or Leaving Las Vegas, like Nicolas Cage, where he goes and intentionally tries to drink it. But there weren't many people saying like, well, I'm just a wine drinker. And so I told myself, I still have a family. I haven't wrecked a car. I've never gotten arrested. So I'm okay. But what that did was it kept me out for longer, kind of suffering in silence, because it wasn't, I didn't know anybody that got sober. Nobody I knew went to treatment. There was one woman I know that got sober. She lives in California, and I drank with her during high school, and that was it. And she was one of the people I called when I was like, I think everybody on here maybe remembers MySpace, like the original, like social media. And so she had on there, it's like, do you drink or smoke was one of the questions that they asked. And she put no and no. And I was like, you're a liar, because I remember like smoking marijuana in a clam baked like tent in your front yard in high school. Like, this is not true. You do smoke. And you do. She's like, no, I got sober. And she said to me, she goes, your elevator's going down at any time and you choose when to get off. And there was something in that statement that was really powerful to me, because it took me out of that victim mentality of this is happening to me, to I have a choice on when I can stop this elevator from going down. At that point I'd gotten on, I don't know if anybody's in DC or familiar with DC. I got on the Metro and ended up in Anacostia in 2005 by myself. I got a text message the next day from an unknown number that says, I put you back on the train. I hope you're okay. I'm like, oh. And I laughed it off, but that started feeling really scary. And this was like the flip phone days. And so I don't know, thank God there was no social media other than like on the computer and stuff. But like things like that started feeling really scary when I started blacking out and not having any recollection consistently of what happened the night before, and incidents like that would happen. And then the biggest, like, for those, if anybody knows somebody that's in like recovery or an addict or has substance use disorder, what I found was to eventually, like I say, if people say like, how do you describe addiction? I say, it is like your best friend in the world who's also trying to kill you. Like, it sounds paradoxical, but that's, it's like someone that you turn to in every situation that's literally also trying to kill you. And I had finished 2 bottles of wine one night and I wasn't drunk. I wasn't feeling anything. And I went across the street to a hotel. The guy's like, it's closing in 30 minutes. And I'm like, great, plenty of time. Can I have a glass of wine? And I drank 6 glasses of wine in 30 minutes, didn't get drunk. And you'll hear people talk about it's the moment when the drug or drink or whatever it is, it fails you. It stops working. It doesn't give you that anesthetized checkout that I was looking for. And so I just got really sick and I'm like, well, now what? Now what?
Is that what gave you the courage to seek treatment? And I know, it's never a one and done. Like, there's multiple attempts to get things on the right path. But what gave you the courage to, start this 15 years of sobriety?
Yeah, ironically, what gave me the courage to get sober is the same thing that gave me the courage to speak out 15 years later, and that was shame. I was in a relationship and he said to me, he's like, look, if you don't tell your family how bad this is, if you don't get help, I'm going to tell your family how bad this is. Cause I really hit it as I thought I hit it. I mean, they knew, and they're like, my mom will say, I thought it was a phase. You drink too much, but what I started to do was learn to hide it better. So not pick up the phone when I was drunk, not be around them, wait till I literally got in the car to drive home to start drinking. I mean, which is not safe. And I recognize that that's incredibly dangerous. But he said that, and I was like, well, I'm so ashamed if people know who I really am and that I'm struggling with this. So I'm going to go get help secretly because I don't want them to know. And I thought if it doesn't work, like at least I get this guy off my back and then I'll figure it out from there, and I wasn't really sure because I'd gone to 12-step meetings before also to get people off my back because they were like, you have a problem. Like, well, if I just go to a couple meetings, maybe it'll give me a break and I can start drinking like a lady. And that's kind of the misnomer and the misconception for people with substance use disorder. I thought if I just took a little break, then I'd be able to go drink normally. And what I've learned is that for me, that's not possible because it's a genetic, I don't process it. I'm allergic to it. And I can't stop. And another really powerful analogy that I saw the other day, I think it was yesterday, and people are like, what is addiction? And it's like, put your phone down for 24 hours. Don't touch it. But every time you think about it, that's what an addict goes through when it comes to addiction and substance use and using and picking up. It's not a choice. Right? And it's breaking that. And it's really hard. And so I went to outpatient treatment. And for me, that's what I needed, because what I found too is that I used external things to fix an internal problem, right? And a lot of people do it, whether it's ice cream, shopping, Amazon, sex, gambling, food, addiction, like all of these things, we start to feel bad or we start to feel really happy or really low. And we look for something outside of ourselves to fix that feeling, to make it go away, to make us feel better, whatever that is. And for me, the only tool I had was alcohol. And so when I went to treatment, they were like, we're going to teach you feelings management. And I'm like, what? This is like stupid. Feelings management? Like, who doesn't know how to feel? Me. I had no idea how to manage my feelings. Like, I had no idea I was angry. I didn't know what sadness looked like. I didn't know what joy felt like, because every single time I had any of those start to come up, I would pour alcohol on my body to anesthetize them. And so it wasn't only putting down the drink, but it was learning to live life and allow feelings to come up that I'd never felt before 14, that I felt. It had been 15 years. I got sober at 29. So I drank for 15 years.
So sober for 15 years, but what made you finally decide to really speak out and talk about this as publicly as you have?
I started to get a little emotional. So because I still felt a little shame around it. I was 15 years sober, and I still felt that saying out loud that I struggled with addiction was shameful. I was also coming out of a relationship where I was told it was shameful. And that goes back to surrounding yourself with people that either support you or tear you down. And I had been in a place where someone said, if you tell anybody, people won't like you. And that was like, I want people to like me. I want to have friends. Like, I want that connection with people. And so I stayed silent. And so when that ended, I had this moment of, wait a second, if I'm feeling shame, what about the woman, especially coming out of COVID? The numbers, the 2.5 men to every 1 woman seeks treatment, seeks help for addiction. 300% increase in women in drinking among women with children at home. I mean, women are now catching up to men when it comes to deaths by alcohol. It's astronomical that how quickly mommy wine culture, all of those things. And I had this moment of clarity. Call it a download, call it intuition. Whatever it is, I'm like, you don't have the luxury to stay silent anymore when there are literally women who feel like you did 15 years ago that are struggling in silence. And so I said, you know what? And I read this, someone said, we recover in the light so others can heal in private, because some people don't want to talk about it, aren't ready to talk about it, but I found that was part of my story, and it saved my life and it put my life on a new trajectory, meaning had I not put down alcohol, I wouldn't have been able to be the person I am today. And at 46, I said this, 2 years ago was when I was finally like, you know what? I like this person, but it was because I put down alcohol now almost 17 years ago, and started really diving into the work to look at my part, if that, makes sense. So shame was a big piece. That's why I got sober, and trying to dispel that addiction is a shameful, it's a decision. People say
Yeah.
like it's a decision. I'm like, it's not a decision, it's a disease. And so if I, come from I had a great childhood, I had a great family, I went to a great school, I had all, on the outside, I looked great. And that was part of my thing too. I thought if I look good on the outside and I had a smile on and my clothes were clean, I had a shower that day, and you thought I was good, then that was all that mattered.
Mhm.
Right. And so that also took a lot of work to say like, but I'm burning alive on the inside. Everyone else, I'm the one that I live with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I need to start focusing on what I need.
You and I would likely have never met or become friends without a mutual friend, Charlie Engel. So Charlie is pretty familiar to most people in the Outlier Project. We've had the pleasure of having him on multiple times. He got voted into the Outlier Hall of Fame, so he's kind of a legend around these parts. Tell me about your relationship with Charlie Engel. Or actually, for those who don't know who Charlie Engel is, tell us who he is, and then tell us about that relationship that you guys have, because I think it's pretty special.
We do. I mean, he's hands down one of my favorite people on the planet, and I think he would say the same. I mean, we just connected super quickly when we both are ambassadors for Ashley addiction treatment, so we met through the sober space. But Charlie, my favorite Charlieism or Charlie's story is, he wrote a book. He ran across the Sahara Desert when he was 15 years sober. He's the only
Who
man
doesn't?
because right. I mean, 2 marathons a day for 111 days across the Sahara Desert, like lost toenails, like bones were sticking out of his body, like, and there were 3 of them. And if one person quit, they all had to pull the project. And so if you know Charlie, like, keep going, he's like, you're not. And anyway, he's just a phenomenal guy. He was living in his car, it shot up. He was addicted to crack. And he started running when he got sober. He was like, I'm going to attend 90 meetings in 90 days, and I'm also going to run. And that's what he started to do. And his favorite thing is like, you have to redefine your relationship with pain when it comes to running. So the movie that he did, Running the Sahara Desert, was voiced by Matt Damon. And it launched water.org, which was the largest water nonprofit bringing water to, I think it's sub-Saharan Africa. And he's just a phenomenal guy. And so now he does these really ultra endurance events to raise money and awareness for different things. Water was one, anti-human trafficking is another. He's just a really amazing guy. I mean, Scott, and everybody that meets Charlie is like, love that guy.
Yeah.
And that's truly who he is. And so we met 2 years ago. I was working some for his rate. He was doing a 30-hour run for his 30 years of continuous sobriety. And I was helping them with some PR at Ashley. And I met Charlie, and we've been literally connected at the hip since. I love that guy. He's just a really epic human. And he's still a baby. Did you read his book?
It's unbelievable. He's so good.
He like stole a baby, and I was like, "He's still a baby?" He's like, "I gave it back," and they had stolen my car. I put the baby in my car. I mean, I love him. Yeah, he's gonna come and visit us here in DC next week.
He's amazing. If you had to give us advice, everyone on this call knows somebody who is struggling to stay sober or to get sober. What do you do? Like, what steps should we take, whether that person's a friend or a loved one or whatever? What are your suggestions? Like, what can we do to help people that we can see are struggling?
I mean, I think so for me, I had to hear my story in somebody else, right? And what I mean by that is I thought I was alone. I thought I was an anomaly. I thought the voices in my head telling me all these things, it was only me. I thought I was the only person that snuck drinks when nobody was looking. And when I went into a meeting, or when I went into treatment, I started hearing people share these same stories, and I felt less alone. It started to decrease the shame that I was a bad person, that I had guilt, that I felt shame about all these things. And so for me, hearing somebody else talk about their story and seeing them recover was really powerful. I love that like podcasts are so big, like the podcasts that are available that show and highlight stories of people who are in recovery, because it's not like, if somebody's not ready to get sober, they're not going to get sober. Like there's really not much, the only thing that gets somebody sober is consequences. And that's really hard, right? Because that's usually when, the consequence for me was that I was going to be outed. Some people, it's a consequence of losing a family or losing a job or their kids. And so, but that's also really hard because most of us love the addict and the alcoholic, or that's why we want them to get clean and sober, because we love them. But the biggest thing I can recommend is sharing, like, hey, I heard this really powerful story on this podcast. You should check it out. Because if they listen, then it kind of opens the door a little bit. And if they hear something in that story, maybe it will have them reach out for help. But it's hard when you love somebody that's sick. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you're building to and what you're creating, not only yourself, but through the Ashley Treatment Center to help people.
So Ashley is a 30-day inpatient treatment center. And so Charlie and I work on their behalf to talk. Their program is phenomenal. The research they do, the research they give out to other facilities. They partner with Hopkins. We offer scholarships for DEI. So we work with Release Recovery Foundation, and Release Recovery works with two treatment centers, and Ashley is one. So we grant all scholarships through Ashley for DEI for people that can otherwise afford treatment. So it's it levels the playing field. So so everybody and anybody that can get and needs help can access that treatment, that world-class recovery. And so Charlie and I speak on their behalf. We build programs on their behalf. So we have a monthly series now, which everybody is welcome to join. It's called the Really Good Recovery Series. Last month, we did relationships in recovery, and we talk about boundaries, and we talk about on both sides. Like there was one woman whose husband almost died, he's been in recovery 5 times. And she's like, I never knew when I left the house if he was going to drink or if he was going to, so she talks about how heavily that weighs on her. And then we had another woman that talked about how she got sober and how that impacted her marriage so we talk on, and then boundaries. And so we touch on really important topics for people who are interested in getting sober, who are sober, or for people who love addicts and alcoholics. And then, go
ahead. Nope.
And so that was the work I was doing with Ashley. And then I was going to go into the right room. Is that what?
Please. Yeah.
That's okay. And so then I also created the right room, which is my space for women. We have, it's the one-on-one high touch individual coaching. We have group coaching cohorts for sober, curious women, as well as women who identify as addicts and alcoholics. And then we'll be launching one kind of like not general purpose, but someone that doesn't identify or doesn't struggle with addiction, but just wants a little bit of a safe space for them to process holistic, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual in that way. But when I got sober, when I started talking openly about recovery, I had just worked with a coach, and I said, you saved my life. I was transitioning out of a relationship that was really painful. And she said, you had the voices and you had that power inside of you the whole time. And the gift that she gave me was so incredible that I wanted to be able to give that back to other women. And then I also wanted to meet women where they are. And so some women can work with a one-on-one, some women are more comfortable in a group, and then some women want kind of a more self-study paced, I don't want to say course, but with the same exercises I give to the one-on-one women. But I really want all women to have access if they want it. And it's not just about sobriety, but sobriety was the tool or was the vehicle that got me where I am today. But what I've learned over the last almost 17 years is that especially women, like I can just use myself as an example, like in our culture too, we're taught to be the boss bee. Sorry, I don't know if you curse here.
Trust me, I'm shocked we haven't dropped F-bombs yet. So
okay, I'm really I already dropped one this morning with my 6-year-old, and he was like, sorry, save that for this group. I was like, I'm sorry. Can I have a do-over? He's like, yeah. Like, Don't go to your little Lutheran school and use that today and like show it, like, please. I totally lost my. Oh, like we're told in our culture to be a boss babe, boss bitch, working mom. Like these are all badges of honor that we're supposed to wear through. And so we continuously add this stuff to our tray, whether it's at home, you know, like with our partners, with our children, with our profession, like whatever it is, we'll continue to take on things because that's what it's a badge of honor. I do this. But in our culture, it's harder, I think, in my experience too, for women to then ask for help. Because if we're told that we're superwoman and my partner says that, he's like, are you wearing your cape today? And I'm like, yeah, back up, you know, or he's like, if you take the cape off, like I can help you. And it's kind of a joke that we have now. And that's his way to say like, you know, you're kind of getting into that self-reliant space. Is there anything I can do to help you? And so I think as women, like that's just how we operate in the world, or how I operated in the world. And so I wanted to create a space for women to be able to like take that cape off and be like, I'm angry, because I also didn't know how to process anger, because I thought angry was volatility. Like anger to me was volatility, and they're two totally different things. And so, you know, what I've also dialed into is like that nervous system regulation. I think we've all heard of like somatics and you know that, because my brain can outthink my body 9 times out of 10. I'm not tired. I can keep going, right? And it goes back to that cultural thing of like, just keep going, you know, harder, faster, stronger, whether it's the performative athlete in me too, that's like, keep going, goal setting, don't quit, you know, if you take a nap, you're lazy. But going back to that, like that external things, looking for an internal to solve the internal problem. Personally, I also found that I was walking through the day, just like grinding it and pushing through. And it was helpful for me to be able to sit back and just talk to a community of women that's like, I get it, right? Because you want someone to get you. You want to feel understood, whether it's in recovery, whether it's just in life, you know, and I wanted to create that space. And so the metaphor was that for a long time, and how I came up with the right room was that for a long time, it wasn't that my voice was wrong. It was just that I was in the wrong room. Right. And so learning to tap into my inner wisdom and my intuition and my inner voice as a woman was so powerful, and saying like, I'm not wrong. This is the wrong situation. This is the wrong relationship. This is the wrong space. I'm going to honor who I am, and I'm going to find the right room. And for me, the right room is having a community of women, having safe space to process emotions, having goals with actions and accountability that aren't, you know, so performative and over the top, but that, you know, the little things, 5-minute meditation, drink 100 ounces of water a day, move your body for 20 minutes, like those things, which took a long time to step into. You know, if you're an athlete, sometimes it's hard to just, it's okay to move my body for 20 minutes and not feel like I can't walk the next day.
Yeah.
It's like changing that mindset.
Hilary, I love what you're doing. To give a voice to a problem that just affects so many people. And I love, you know, all the proactive things you're doing. It's just remarkable. I have a million more questions for you, but unfortunately, so do all these guys. So they have a ton of questions for you. So you ready? We're gonna unleash some of these folks, and they'll get to chat with you. Joe Jacoby in Spain. Let's start with you.
Hilary, I'm just so grateful for your journey to hear and to see you in this chapter, the glow that's here. I'm so happy for that. And I know it hasn't come easy, but yeah, I did. First of all, wanted to say that. Secondly, you spoke about something that I hadn't thought of about being a woman facing addiction and how that's portrayed. And I'm not someone that's looked around for the people that are doing that. But when you said that, so the two people that came to mind for me, not women, but two men, Rich Roll and Charlie. I've read Charlie's book. I listened to Rich's podcast. So here's the kind of the question. I don't know if you listened to Rich's podcast. That's how I came across Charlie, was through that podcast and then the book, and then also here with Scott. But I I hear Rich talk about nuance and context, and then there will be times where he's talking about 12-step, and I feel like a lot of rigidity also. And I was just sort of wondering, and also with Charlie, having read Charlie's book, I did interact with Charlie a little bit around the time I started reading the book, which was great. A lot of big bounces, big extremes from this to that, to this to that, all through his life. These stories are just amazing. So I'm just curious how you observe things like rigidity, big extremes, how you see that. And you also have athletic background. You could also fall back on endurance sports. You could do amazing things if you wanted to do that. But like, what does that look like for you? How do you sort of work with context, nuance, rigidity, big extremes in just your day-to-day today versus, 15 years ago?
And this is a great question. Because when I got sober, like if you think of it as a pendulum, so Rich also grew up around here. He swam
At Landon guy. I went to school with his sister Molly.
He's a great guy. I love what he's done. But the pendulum swing, right? You think of it as like, I'm super happy. And then you're like, I'm the biggest piece of crap in the world, and it swings. And so when I first got sober, that swing was really drastic. And so for a long time, I just wanted it to be here. I just wanted this swing, right? And for me, that's also nervous system regulation. When I'm super dysregulated here versus that window of tolerance, like I want it to be large enough where my emotions fit whatever it is that's going on, if that makes sense. And so I've worked hard on that, but that's totally normal, especially someone new in recovery. And it was really drastic and really big. I remember hearing a story about a woman. She came in, she's so nice. And she's like, oh, I got angry today and I threw a brick through someone's windshield. And we were like, what? She's like, I'm owning it. And we're like, yeah, that seems really drastic, And she's like, so that's pretty normal, that swing. And an example for me, and I love that you brought this up because I'd forgotten about this so I started doing, I did an Ironman in 2010. I was 2 years sober. And, but I also wanted to, when I first got sober, I said, this is what I'm going to do to be perfect. I'm going to quit drinking. I was smoking cigarettes at the time when I drank. I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes. I'm going to quit caffeine. I'm going to quit sugar. I'm going to quit fake sugar. I'm going to run a marathon and I'm going to become a vegan and then I'm going to be perfect. Right. And so at the treatment center, they were like, okay, well, just don't drink today. That's literally all you have to do. And I was like, oh, goodness, like someone let me off the hook. And then what I realized is that desire for perfectionism, and it kind of goes back to this a little bit like the rigidity, that desire for perfectionism, I've realized, is my inability to sit with my imperfections. All it is a control mechanism to try to control my imperfections instead of embracing them, right? And so for me, I've had to sit with those imperfections. And I also signed up I signed up for Cape Fear Badwater. Is that what it's called? I don't know. It's a 50K or something. I was going to do it over my 45th birthday. And I started training for it. It was taking away time that I'm with my son. I have a 6-year-old son. And I'm like, the only reason I'm doing this is so I can put a post somewhere that says I did a 50K. It's not about doing it. It wasn't because I enjoyed it. It was all the ego. And so I ended up pulling out of it for that reason, because I was like, I don't really enjoy it. I like the accolades I get from it. I like people saying, you're such a badass. You did an Ironman and a 50K. Good for you. And you're a mom. And it wasn't that yeah. And so I had to really look at that, like what the intention behind it was. And I decided not to do it. Does that answer your question? I kind of rambled there for.
Thank you so much. I like Scott, I could ask the questions the rest of the hour, and maybe we can have a call another time and catch up a little bit.
I would love
Yes,
to.
thank you.
Hilary, your vulnerability and your openness is it's so important. It's unbelievable. So we've got a bunch more questions, so we'll try to keep these tight and get them all in. Bruce in Portland, you're up.
Hey, Hilary, thank you so much for your candor, your vulnerability, like Scott said, and everything. I'm going to ask a question of you that I had asked of a recent speaker that we had on, and that is, what would you say is the key to being able to sustain sobriety? And I ask because my ex-wife, the mother of my kids, just got out of rehab for probably the 7th time in 10 years. I've lost track, honestly. And I want her so badly to be able to stay sober more than 3 or 4 months. And I would love your insight on this, because this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, I think, on sobriety.
So I actually have a pretty strong opinion on this. And so I'm going to speak pretty bluntly, and not directed at you or your kid's mom, but there's not a lot of support when people get out of rehab. And I think it's awful, right? Because people get out of rehab and it's not, people come out of the hospital for cancer treatment, or they have a major surgery, and they're like, what can we do to bring you can we take your kids for a weekend? Can we bring you food? People get out of recovery, out of a treatment, and they're like, thank God you got your shit together. Now maybe you can start acting like a decent human. And you're like, are you kidding me? I mean, so I'm not saying that you're doing this. This isn't, but I think there's not a lot of support. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of support for people that get out of treatment. 4% of people that come out of treatment stay sober the first time. So it's not surprising. I mean, because I think there's not a lot of support, not just in the and I'm so sorry, that was not directed at you. That I realized that sounded harsh. I don't know what, when I said that I'm just saying in general, a lot of people, when they come out of treatment, a lot of people are like, thank goodness,
Not me. I mean,
yes.
I've seen that movie before.
Yes. It's like, right. And people are like, oh, good, you're finally, and it's, and I think that's the majority of experiences that I've heard people have from a lot of people. And so I think the biggest thing that we can do for people, I think transitional living is I'm not going to totally get on my soapbox, but I think there should be some insurance coverage for transitional living from people coming out of treatment. I'm so happy that she could go away to treatment for 30 days and get that. I think transitional living, like a halfway house, living with other women who are sober with someone that lives in the house is what is really important. If that's not possible, I think daily support groups, community, 12-step meetings is a necessity. Being around other people that understand what you're going through and doing it in a safe space where, I mean, look, like, I think, again, my opinion, men coming out of treatment have a lot of anger. Women coming out of treatment have a lot of shame, right? Because we're told women don't do this. You put your feet on the floor, you don't swear, you don't sweat, you look good, keep your shit together. Men were like, you went out to a bar and did what? Good for you, man. Good for you. It's not the same. And so, I don't know where I was going with that. Clearly I'm very passionate about this, but I think the answer to the question is a support group, or being around other people. And look, like, when I got out of treatment, they said, you're going to have to change people, places, and things. And that was really hard. I had to change my friends. I had to change what I did. I had to change. And I used to walk the hall. I used to walk Target. So I lived in Washington, D.C., and I would go to meetings after work. I went to outpatient treatment for 8 weeks, and then I go to meetings on Friday nights, and I had no idea what to do. I'm like, what do I do on a Friday night? I live by myself in DuPont Circle. So I would drive out to Alexandria, Virginia, to a Target that was open till midnight, and I would walk up and down the aisles until I got tired by myself, because I didn't want to drink. And I told someone that story once, and they were like, what? I'm like, I would do anything not to go back to drinking. Mm-hmm. And this is before a Target sold alcohol. So I literally would walk up. I spent so much money that I didn't. I mean, the joke is you spend money at Target anyway. Like, someone that's sober, that's not spending money on wine anymore. I was like, this looks great. I had so much Target stuff, but I think community is the most important thing.
So if you need any home decor, Hilary might have a closet full of excess stuff.
Do
Rachel, who's practically your neighbor, you're up.
Yeah, born and raised in Baltimore, still live here. So
well, I was born.
Yeah. Howdy neighbor. And I wrote a song called Somebody that I think would very much resonate with you, given the story that you shared. Like a lot. Fellow high achiever, and I'm curious, something that I've often struggled with or wrestled with, and I'm always working through and sharing through my own journey, that you brought up at the very beginning of this, was the need for seeking external validation to fill the internal holes and kind of, wells that we have. So I'm curious, this is definitely not a softball question, but I'm curious, what helps you most connect to any sense of self-acceptance, contentment, or peace? Where do you seek out for that now?
Now I go in. So it's a great question. And I love it. Excuse me 1 second. Hold on. I'm gonna cough. So for a long time, I still sought out external things. And the joke is now sometimes I eat ice cream. Like that's about as extreme as I'll go, because I've noticed patterns and behaviors of wanting to check those things out. I love knowledge. So I'm a knowledge seeker. I've studied breath work. I'm certified in yoga, mindfulness, somatics, nervous system regulation, Pilates, and for me, the one thing I do on the regular when I start feeling disconnected or when I start needing that validation is I get quiet. And this is the number one thing I share with women I work with too, is that I get quiet. I usually sit, I'll sit on my bed or sit and I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll say, what do you need? What do you need? And I say it over and over and over and over again. Not what do you want? Not I should go clean my bedroom or I should go do laundry. Nope. What do you need? What do you need? And who I'm speaking to is that little inner child or soul or whoever it is that's inside of there that is often neglected, and is the one that needs the most validation. And so what comes through, sometimes I just cry. I'll just sit and burst into tears. And I'm like, okay, that's what I needed. I just needed a release. I needed to discharge emotion. Sometimes I'm like, I want a nap. I'm like, I want to call my mom. And I'm like, I need to go for coffee. I need to go for a walk. But just getting quiet in that moment usually gives me space to explore what it is I need, not what I think I want or what I should do. And I find that giving myself what I need has become very validating.
It's beautiful. Thank you. I'll follow up afterwards.
good.
I'm writing a book. I'd love to interview you, but thank you so much for what you do and what you shared.
Thank you.
And we have to send your song to Hilary because it's phenomenal. Scott Raven in Atlanta, you're up.
Thank you, Hilary. Beautiful vulnerability that you shared there and your cause to help women. And as somebody who went through his own alcoholic downfall 7 years ago, it certainly hits home, particularly for me as a man. And that's the root of my question, which is for men who don't like to ask for help, solve the problem yourself, man up. And I think there was a study that I read, 1 in 6 adult men think that they have no true friends in the world. How would you talk about your personal story to them to seek the help they need?
A great question. So where I go with that is oh my gosh, my brain. So I have a 6-year-old boy, right? And I'm trying to teach him now it's okay to cry, right? It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel whatever you feel. If you're angry, cool. That's fine. Let's punch a pillow. Let's stomp like a dinosaur. Let's process the anger in a way that's healthy and not stuff it down. Because I think a lot of us humans, women, men, we're walking through as these wounded children, right? Wanting to look like we have it all together. I think it's tough. I do think it's tough for men to share emotions and vulnerability. And it goes back. I think the one thing I have is to find a community of other people, of other men, of other men and women that are your safe space. And look, even as a woman, I found that was pretty hard. Excuse me. I've been working with a therapist. And I said to her, I'm like, I don't know if I want to share this with you. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because you might not like me anymore. I mean, I've been working, I'm like, she's like, what would happen if I didn't like you? I'm like, I don't want you to not like me. And so I think it goes back to that. Like, we want people to like us. We want to be accepted. And so to find that acceptance, it's surrounding ourselves with people that accept us for who we are. But that takes a lot of vulnerability, and that's really hard. And I think, but I think getting sober is a great first step, because we have to kind of own our shit, right? Like, we have to be humble, and we have to say, like, I really messed up. I'm sorry. Right. And I think a lot of that comes from saying I'm sorry too. Like, a lot of people don't, I don't know if that was a good answer.
It
But
was. Thank you.
that breaks my
So-
heart. 1 in 6 men say they don't have a real friend. Is that what
Yeah.
the stat was?
I mean, I've heard you talk before about the importance of community. And, I think for anybody, it's just it's so vitally important. We've got 2 more questions, so let's try to get these in.
I got 'em. I'll be
We're
quick.
going to go with Doug in Florida.
So thank you. And hey, Hilary. So contextually, I was having an exchange with Joe yesterday, ironically, perhaps. And he said, "Are you jumping on the call tomorrow?" And it wasn't really on my radar screen, to be honest with you, just because of competing priorities. And on Joe's recommendation, he said, I think this is one you won't want to miss, or something to that effect. And with all due respect, love, admiration, especially now, Hilary, I didn't really know your story at the time. What you or others may not know is Scott, which speaks volumes about our community, makes it a point to send out sort of primers on each and every guest that we can then empower us to do our own research on the guests, so that we can be as engaged as we possibly can in these discussions. So on Joe's recommendation, I started to watch some of your videos and look at your story, and I knew it was going to be a really, really hard. It's going to be a very hard one for me to sit with. And I said to myself, fuck it. Like, I gotta sit in the pain, because this is a fresh wound for me. Some may know my 18-year-old struggles mightily with addiction. We're about 8 months into this journey. So it's real fresh. And he's now living in a young adult sober living facility. And the nightmare, is what it is. And I feel as though I've got great support, be it therapy, other groups I'm involved with, and some dear, dear friends. But it's fucking hell. I'm not gonna lie. It's hell. So you actually, A, it was such a beautiful discussion, so real, so raw. And B, you kind of answered where I was going with this, and a lot of people did, which is one of the only things I'm holding on to now, in the somewhat disjointed connection I have with my son at this point, is community. And I put a lot of stock in that, because I'm very attuned in his community, who he's hanging with, and who his sort of support system is. And it's reinforced for me in this discussion, I think, how critically important that is. He has aligned himself with some others in that group that are just really, really good influences. And I was going to ask you maybe 20 minutes ago, about the importance you put in community, but I think I understand. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing so vulnerably and openly. I feel your pain, because my 6, it's terrifying. And I think about it. We have the disease on both sides of our family. And so I wonder about my 6-year-old. And so I and also, yes, thank you for sharing. But yes, also community, I think, is the number one thing that's so important, as it doesn't make you feel alone, whether it's you have support. And I know we've connected, so I'm happy to talk more about this. If there's any support groups that you're interested in, like parents, I know we have one at Ashley, parents that have, there's one woman whose son, he's gone to treatment 3 different times. And anyway, it's a beautiful community. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So let's chat again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hilary, can we sneak in one last question?
Of course.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom Doherty in California. You're up. Clean
Hey,
up
Doug.
hitter.
Doug, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing such a personal story. I think my story is one of personal too. I lost both my parents to alcoholism and suicide. So this has always been a challenge. But I look at your vulnerability being an advocate for the most lethal legal drug we have. And what we didn't have during that time in the 2000s, I wonder the impact it's having now, which is social media. What is social media in your experience? What are you seeing from people? How are they handling not only their sobriety, but then the social media pressure that comes with that as well?
So I can only share what I've experienced, what I've seen, because a lot of the people I follow are advocates or women who are sober or moms who are sober, kind of trying to dismantle mommy wine culture or gray area drinkers. And what I'm even learning, as I identify as someone with substance use disorder, it is not safe for me on any levels to have any amount of alcohol ever. End of story. Some women or some people are now calling gray area drinkers, and they're kind of analogizing it as like a spectrum of almost like autism, right? Like there's a spectrum of drinking. And I'm like, okay, with all due respect, I don't know anything about that. I just know about mine. But I follow a lot of women that's what they, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? That's what they call themselves. Perspective. Yeah. So those are kind of who I follow, and they will take people down for posting. There was recently a jewelry company that said, oh my gosh, something about wine, like something this or 5 glasses of wine, whatever you want to do, it's gonna make you happy or something like that. And there were at least 5 different accounts that blasted this thing, tagged them, said do not buy from them, some with 200,000 followers, some with 50,000 followers. So there is a really active community online on social media of women who are saying mommy wine culture is not cool. Will call people out, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. I don't tend to call people out, but my concern, I think, with social media is the kids. Like my 6-year-old, I try to keep him off as much as possible because of like one consent to the dopamine. He's like, can you post that picture? How many likes did you get? And I'm like, no, you're 6. Like, we're not going to go there. So I don't have an answer but I don't know. On one hand, I'm grateful that social media was not around when I was drinking, because
I agree. I think, sobriety is hard enough. And I think, God forbid, my mother had access to social media, or my father at the time. I could only imagine.
I don't know. I may have quit sooner.
Yeah.
Pictures of me out there, like, no, I'm kidding. Kind of kidding. Yeah, I don't know that social media is, I don't know. I've got my own thoughts on that.
Yeah.
It's good for some things, but I think it does create a false image of people. And so without that backing of vulnerability, but I think there's also a backlash, actually, now that I'm saying that, of people willing to be a little bit more vulnerable and saying like, this is a highlight reel. This is what really happened, and I hope that continues.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hilary, this has been a powerful hour. You realize that, we have 700 members that hopefully everyone will eventually be able to watch this on replay. But even for, I think we lost a whole bunch of people at the hour mark, but, for such a small group, how many people are impacted by this subject? It's probably every single person on this call. It's amazing. So the work that you're doing is so important. I so appreciate you. I so appreciate you carving out the time to talk to us, because you just helped a whole bunch of people. And that's where I have such a strong belief in the ripple effect. It's like, if you just helped, 60 people, and those people are going to take something that you said and, help somebody else. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
right.
amazing.
So are you. Thank you for having me. This group was really
So support Hilary and all the great work she's doing on social media, because that's social media used in a very good light. And just send good vibes her way. Hilary, I hope you feel better. All right,
Thank
Joe, I
you.
hope you feel better. We've got a bunch of sick people on the call, but I appreciate everybody showing up. Hilary, you're the best. We'll catch up very, very soon. Tell Charlie I said hi.
I will. We'll send you a voice text, video.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks,
Yes.
Hilary.